Another incident indicating the tender and compassionate heart of Swami Vivekananda may be mentioned here. One day he was engaged in teaching a disciple the Vedas with the abstruse commentary of Shankaracharya, when Girish Chandra Ghosh, the great playwright of Bengal and an intimate lay disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, arrived. By way of teasing him, the Swami said, addressing him with familiar name, "Well, GC, you have spent your whole life with Krishna and Vishnu. You are quite innocent of the Vedas and other scriptures." Girish Chandra admitted his ignorance of the scriptures and said, "Hail Sri Ramakrishna, the very embodiment of the Vedas." An adept in the knowledge of human nature, Girish was well aware that Swami Vivekananda, in spite of his preaching, the austere philosophy of Vedanta, had a heart that was tender in the extreme. He wanted to reveal that side of the Swami's nature before the disciple, and began to paint, in his usual poetic language, a heart-rending picture of the afflictions of the Indian people, the starvation of the masses, the humiliation of Hindu women, the ill health and general suffering of people everywhere. Suddenly addressing the Swami, he said, "Now, please tell me, do your Vedas teach us how to remedy this state of affairs?" As the Swami listened to his friend's words, he could hardly suppress his emotion. At last it broke all bonds, and he burst into tears. Drawing the attention of the Swami's disciple to the great leader, Girish Chandra said, "Perhaps you have always admired your teacher's intellect. Now you see his great heart." On 1st May 1897, Swami Vivekananda called a meeting of the monastic and lay devotees of Sri Ramakrishna at the house of the Master's intimate disciple, Balaram Bose, for the purpose of establishing his work on an organized basis. He told them that by contrasting Hindu society with American society, he was convinced that lack of an organizing spirit was one of the great shortcomings of the Hindu character. Much of the intelligence and energy of the Hindus was being expended without producing any fruitful result. He also called how Buddhism had spread both in India and abroad through Buddhist organizations. Therefore, he asked the cooperation of the monastic and householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna in order to organize the educational, philanthropic, and religious activities which he had already inaugurated, but which had hitherto been carried out in an unsystematic way. Further, the Swami declared that in a country like India, in its then current state of development, it would not be wise to form an organization on a democratic basis, where each member had an equal voice and decisions were made according to the vote of majority. Democratic principles could be followed later, when, with the spread of education, people would learn to sacrifice individual interests and personal prejudices for the public weal. Therefore, said the Swami, the organization for the time being should be under the leadership of a leader whose authority everybody must obey. In the fullness of time, it would come to be guided by the opinion and consent of others. Moreover, he himself was only acting in the capacity of a servant of the common master, as were they all. Swami Vivekananda proposed to the members present that the association should bear the name of him in whose name we have become sannyasins, taking whom as your ideal you are leading the life of householders, and whose holy name, influence, and teachings have, within 12 years of his passing away, spread in such an unthought-out way both in East and in the West. All the members enthusiastically approved of the Swami's proposal, and the Ramakrishna Mission Association came into existence. The aim of the association was to spread the truths that Ramakrishna, for the good of humanity, had preached and taught through the example of his own life, and to help others to put them into practice for their physical, mental, and spiritual advancement. The duty of the association, the Ramakrishna mission, was to direct in the right spirit the activities of the movement inaugurated by Sri Ramakrishna for the establishment of fellowship among the followers of different religions, knowing them all to be so many forms of one undying eternal religion. Its methods of action were to train men so as to make them competent to teach such knowledge and sciences as are conducive to the material and spiritual welfare of the masses, to promote and encourage arts and industries, to introduce and spread among the people in general Vedanta and other ideas as elucidated in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. The Ramakrishna Mission Association was to have two departments of action, Indian and foreign. The Indian, through retreats and monasteries established in different parts of India, would train such monks and householders as might be willing to devote their lives to the teaching of others. The foreign would send trained members of the order to countries outside India to start centers there for the preaching of Vedanta in order to bring about a closer relationship and better understanding between India and foreign countries. The aims and ideals of the Ramakrishna mission, being purely spiritual and humanitarian, were to have no connection with politics. Swami Vivekananda must have felt a great inner satisfaction after the establishment of the Ramakrishna mission. His vision of employing religion through head, heart, and hands for the welfare of man was realized. He found no essential conflict among science, religion, art, and industry. He could be used for worship of God. Everything could be used, he said, and served well through his diverse manifestations as through the contemplation of the Lord's non-dual aspect. Further, as the great heart of Ramakrishna had embraced all of mankind with its love, so also the Ramakrishna mission was pledged to promote brotherhood among different faiths, since their harmony constituted the eternal religion, the Sanatana Dharma. Swami Vivekananda, the general president, made Brahmananda and Yogananda the president and vice president of the Calcutta Center. Weekly meetings were organized at Balaram Bose's house to discuss the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedanta scriptures, and religious subjects in general. Even now, Swami Vivekananda could not completely convince some of his brother disciples about his new conception of religion, namely the worship of God through the service of man. They had heard Sri Ramakrishna speak time and again against preaching, excessive study of the scriptures, and charitable activities, and exhort aspirants to intensify their love of God through prayer and meditation in solitude. Therefore, they regarded Vivekananda's activities in the West as out of harmony with the Master's teachings. One of them said bluntly to the Swami, "You did not preach our Master in America. You only preached yourself." But Vivekananda retorted with equal bluntness, "Let people understand me first, then they will understand Sri Ramakrishna." On one occasion, Swami Vivekananda felt that some of these brother disciples wanted to create a narrow sect in the name of Ramakrishna and turn the Ramakrishna movement into a cult of the temple, where the religious activities would center around devotional music, worship, and prayer alone. His words burst upon them like a bombshell. He asked them how they knew that his ideas were not in keeping with those of Sri Ramakrishna, saying, "Do you want to shut Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of infinite ideas, within your own limits? I shall break these limits and scatter his ideas broadcast all over the world. He never enjoined me to introduce his worship and the like." Had it not been demonstrated to Vivekananda time and again that Sri Ramakrishna was behind him in all his actions, He knew that through the Master's grace alone he had come out triumphant from all ordeals, whether in the wilderness of India or in the busy streets of Chicago. So Swami Vivekananda continued, saying, Sri Ramakrishna is far greater than the disciples understand him to be. He is the embodiment of infinite spiritual ideas, capable of development in infinite ways. One glance of his generous and gracious eyes can create 100,000 Vivekanandas at this instant. If he chooses now, instead, to work through me, making me his instrument, I can only bow to his will. Vivekananda took great care lest sentimentalism and narrowness in one form or another should creep in, for he detested these from the bottom of his heart. But things came to a climax one day at Balaram's house in Calcutta when Swami Yogananda, a brother disciple whom Sri Ramakrishna had pointed out as belonging to his inner circle of devotees, said that the Master had emphasized bhakti alone for spiritual seekers, and that philanthropic activities, organizations, homes of service for the public good, and patriotic work were the Swami's own peculiar ideas, the result of his Western education and travel in Europe and America. Swami Vivekananda at first retorted to his brother with a sort of rough humor, saying, What do you know? You are an ignorant man. What do you understand of religion? You are only good at praying with folded hands. O Lord, how beautiful is your nose, how sweet are your eyes, and all such nonsense. And you think your salvation is secured, and Sri Ramakrishna will come at the final hour and take you by the hand to the highest heaven. Study, public preaching, and doing humanitarian works are, according to you, Maya, because he said to someone, Seek and find God first. Doing good to the world is a presumption. As if God is such an easy thing to be achieved. As if the Lord is such a fool as to make himself a plaything in the hands of an imbecile. You think you have understood Sri Ramakrishna better than myself. You think jnana is dry knowledge to be attained by a desert path, killing out the tenderest faculties of the heart. Your bhakti is sentimental nonsense which makes one impotent. You want to preach Sri Ramakrishna as you have understood him, which is mighty little. Hands off. Who cares for your Ramakrishna? Who cares for your bhakti and mukti? Who cares what your scriptures say? I will go into 1,000 hells cheerfully if I can rouse my countrymen, immersed in tamaguna, to stand on their own feet and be men inspired with the spirit of karma yoga. I am not a follower of Ramakrishna or anyone, but of him only who serves and helps others without caring for his own bhakti and mukti. The Swami's voice was choked with emotion, his body shook, and his eyes flashed fire. Quickly he went to the next room. A few moments later, some of his brother disciples entered the room and found him absorbed in meditation, tears flowing from his half-closed eyes. After nearly an hour, the Swami got up, washed his face, and joined his spiritual brothers in the drawing room. His features still showed traces of the violent storm through which he had just passed, but he had recovered his calmness, and he said to them softly, When a man attains bhakti, his heart and nerves become so soft and delicate that he cannot bear even the touch of a flower. I cannot think or talk of Sri Ramakrishna long without being overwhelmed. So I am always trying to bind myself with the iron chains of jnana. For still my work for my motherland is unfinished, and my message to the world not fully delivered. So as soon as I find that those feelings of bhakti are trying to come up and sweep me off my feet, I give a hard knock to them and make myself firm and adamant by bringing up austere jnana. Oh, I have work to do. I am a slave of Ramakrishna, who left his work to be done by me and will not give me rest till I have finished it. And oh, how shall I speak of him? Oh, his love for me. He was again about to enter into an ecstatic mood when Swami Yogananda and the others changed the conversation, took him on the roof for a stroll, and tried to divert his mind by small talk. They felt that Vivekananda's inmost soul had been aroused, and they remembered the Master saying that the day Naren knew who he was, he would not live in this body. So from that day, the brother disciples did not again criticize the Swami's method, knowing fully well that the Master alone was working through him. From this incident, one sees how Vivekananda, in his inmost heart, relished bhakti, the love of God. But in his public utterances, he urged the Indians to keep their emotionalism under control. He emphasized the study of Vedanta because he saw in it a sovereign tonic to revivify them. He further prescribed for his countrymen both manual and spiritual work, scientific research, and service to men. Vivekananda's mission was to infuse energy and faith into a nation of dyspeptics, as he called them, held under the spell of their own sentimentality. He wished in all fields of activity to awaken that austere elevation of spirit which arouses heroism. As with his master, the natural tendency of Vivekananda's mind was to be absorbed in contemplation of the Absolute. Again, like Sri Ramakrishna, he had to bring down his mind forcibly to the consciousness of the world in order to render service to men. Thus he kept a balance between the burning love of the Absolute and the irresistible appeal of suffering humanity. And what makes Swami Vivekananda the patriot saint of modern India and at the same time endears him so much to the West is that at all times when he had to make a choice between the two, it was always the appeal of suffering humanity that won the day. He cheerfully sacrificed the bliss of samadhi to the amelioration of the suffering of men. The Swami's spirit acted like a contagion upon his brother disciples. One of them, Swami Abhakananda, as stated before, fed and nursed the sufferers from famine at Murshidabad in Bengal. Another, Swami Trigutanitita, in 1897, opened a famine relief center at Dinajpur. Other centers were established at Deoghar, Dakshineswar, and Calcutta. Swami Vivekananda was overjoyed to see the happy beginning of his work in India. And to Mary Hale he wrote on 9th July, 1897, "Only one idea was burning in my brain, to start the machine for elevating the Indian masses, and that I have succeeded in doing to a certain extent. It would have made your heart glad to see how my boys are working in the midst of famine and disease and misery, nursing by the mat bed of the cholera-stricken pariah, and feeding the starving Chandala, and the Lord sends help to me, to them, to all. He is with me, the beloved, and he was when I was in America, in England, when I was roaming about unknown from place to place in India. What do I care about what they say? The babies, they do not know any better. What? I, who have realized the spirit and the vanity of all earthly nonsense, to be swerved from my path by babies' prattle? Do I look like that? I feel my task is done. At most 3 or 4 years more of life are left. I have lost all wish for my salvation. I never wanted earthly enjoyments. I must see my machine in strong and working order, and then knowing for sure that I have put in a lever for the good of humanity, in India at least, which no power can drive back, I will sleep without caring what will be next. And may I be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe in, the sum total of all souls. And above all, my God the wicked, my God the miserable, my God the poor of all races, of all species, is the especial object of my worship.